This is a video explaining and demonstrating how to do 3 different athletic skills. So the first skill that we'll be looking at is the 100-meter sprint. The next one is the discus, which is our throwing event. And the third one is the long jump. Let's start with the sprint.
I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's go.
Now that you've seen the skill in its entirety, we're going to go through and look at each individual step of the 100-meter sprint, breaking the skill down and explaining and demonstrating how to do each aspect. 100-meter sprint can be broken up into 4 distinct phases: the starting or push-off phase, the drive phase, the stride phase, and the final lift phase. Each phase will be explained and demonstrated, with the key points to remember emphasized throughout this video. The most efficient way to start the 100-meter sprint is by using a crouch start, as you see here. However, a standing start is recommended for most students, as it is far easier to execute and teach. Therefore, this is how the start of the sprint will be demonstrated in this video. The starting phase creates forward movement. In this phase, your stronger leg should be forward and on the start line. The rear leg should be behind and just slightly to the side. Both legs should be bent with your feet pointing in the direction that you want to run. You then need to move your weight onto your front leg and push off in a forward direction. At the same time, you need to fully extend the rear leg. You need to drive your arms hard in opposition to the legs and start to extend your body. You shouldn't straighten completely. Try to remain at a 45-degree angle to the ground. The next phase is the drive phase. A runner will be in this phase for the first 30 meters. In this phase, you should keep your body forward and your head down. In this phase, you need to start to accelerate and pump your arms with your elbows bent at 90 degrees. It is essential that this is done forward and back rather than across the body. The third phase of the sprint is the stride phase. This is where you need to straighten your body, get tall, and get your knee high in front to hip height. You should take long strides and really stretch out. You should pump your arms hard in opposition to the legs, and all motion should be forward, not up and down. Another key point to remember is to land on the ball of the foot. This should be done throughout the entire sprint, not just in this phase. Some other key points to remember in the stride phase include: the head and body need to be stable, with your shoulders relaxed. A good way to do this is to focus on something that is ahead. Another key point to remember is that your eyes need to be focused forward. So you need to have complete tunnel vision, concentrating on what's ahead. The final phase of the sprint is the lift phase. This is where a runner has reached full speed, usually about 30 to 40 meters from the finish line. In this phase, you should continue to run as you have in the stride phase, but with more urgency, trying as hard as possible to get to the finish line. In this phase, your leg action should be fast and light, as if you're running across a hot surface. And that's the 100-meter sprint. In summary, when running the 100-meter sprint, you need to remember that in the standing start, the runner should position the dominant leg in front and on the line. You then need to push off on this leg, extending the back leg and driving the arms hard. Throughout the entire sprint, pump your arms in opposition to your legs at 90 degrees. This is done forward and back, not across the body. You should land on the ball of the foot throughout the entire sprint. In the stride phase, you need to lift your knees high, almost to hip height, and take long strides. Throughout the sprint, Your head and trunk need to be stable, your shoulders should be relaxed, and your eyes focused forward. Now, let's look at the discus. Now the discus throws you've just seen there are quite advanced because the athletes use the spin in their throws. That might be something that you work towards in your athletics unit or during the lessons that focus on discus. However, for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to be demonstrating how to do the discus throw from a standing start, as that's probably what you'd be expected to do in a school setting. First, we will watch the entire skill. Now we're going to run through how to throw the discus, looking at each part of the skill and the key points to remember at each stage. First, let's look at how to grip the discus. The most important thing to remember when gripping the discus is you want your hands spread evenly over the entire discus. To do this, you want to hold it in the pads of the first finger joints. You don't want to grip the discus too tight, you want it reasonably loose so it can be released easily. In discus, you must enter and exit from the back of the circle. When preparing to throw the discus, you need to stand at the front of the circle with your feet facing 90 degrees to the direction of the throw. That means you need to be nice and side on in the direction in which you're going to throw the discus. Now you also want your feet shoulder width apart, your knees slightly bent, and your weight on your back foot. In the next part of the throw, you need to bend the knee of the back leg and rotate the upper body as the throwing arm is taken back. Make sure you remember to keep the throwing arm straight at all times. Once you've taken the discus back, you need to transfer your weight onto the front foot, pull the throwing arm through, and release the discus. When throwing, it's important that you don't bend or flick your wrist. You want the discus to be released out the front of the hand so it rolls off the front finger and spins away from the body. Note the angle of the wrist in this section of the video. And that's how you throw the discus. Just to recap, the main points to remember when throwing the discus are: you need to stand at the front of the circle with your feet facing 90 degrees to the direction of the throw. The feet should be shoulder width apart, the knees slightly bent, and weight should be on the back foot. When holding the discus, the hand should be spread over the entire discus, holding it in the pads of the first finger joints. When taking the discus back, you need to bend the knee of the back leg and rotate the upper body as the throwing arm is taken back. The throwing arm must be straight at all times. To throw the discus, you need to transfer weight onto the front foot, pull the throwing arm through, and release the discus. The discus should roll off the front finger and spin away from the body. The third and final athletics event that will be explained and demonstrated in this video is the long jump. The long jump can be broken down into four main components: the approach run, the takeoff, the flight phase, and the landing. Each of these phases will be explained and demonstrated in the next section of this video. The first component of the long jump is the approach run. The athlete begins this run from a standing start with a marked forward lean to develop speed, clearly seen here in the video. The approach run is an accelerating run with maximum controllable speed. It's very important to maintain a consistent rhythm in your run so you can take off accurately at the board. Many of the key points which you should remember from the sprint apply to the approach run in the long jump. The athlete should run on the balls of the feet as in sprinting, with a natural head position. Before they reach the takeoff board, they should be upright. You should focus your eyes beyond the pit and not at the takeoff board. In the final part of the approach run, just before the athlete reaches the takeoff board, they need to dip and then raise their hips. This makes the final step longer and helps with pushing off the takeoff board. The second phase of the long jump is the takeoff. In this phase, you should take off on your dominant leg and try to step in the middle of the takeoff board. When the athlete reaches the board, they need to have a slight heel-to-toe rocking action of the takeoff foot, and the upper body should be leaning slightly forward. They then need to push off and up on the takeoff leg, driving the free thigh and arms upwards. The takeoff leg also needs to extend vigorously. The third phase of the long jump is the flight phase. In the first part of the flight, the takeoff position is maintained. Some athletes use a hitch kick, which involves rotating the arms and legs in a cyclic manner, whilst others just hang their arms and legs in the air. At the highest part of the jump, the body shape needs to be long and thin. Prior to landing, the jumper then needs to move their legs in front of the body. The fourth and final phase of the long jump is the landing. To land successfully, the jumper needs to pull the heels up, bring the head down towards the knees, and pull the body in towards the heels as they hit the sand. The ideal landing position is shown in the diagram. Another important point to remember in the landing is that you want your body to be still moving forward, and the upper body should move ahead of the legs at the completion of the jump. To do this, the jumper needs to swing their arms forward over the feet to create forward momentum. Remember to exit out the back of the pit, because jumps are measured from the impression nearest the board made in the pit by any part of the jumper's body. And that's the long jump. Things that you need to remember about the long jump are: in the approach run, you should run on the balls of the feet as in sprinting, with your head in a neutral position. You should attempt to maintain control throughout the run, keeping your eyes focused beyond the pit. Before the takeoff board, you should be upright. In the takeoff phase, your foot should have a slight heel-to-toe rocking action at the board. The free thigh and arms should be driven upwards and forwards, and then the takeoff leg should also be extended. Flight phase, at the highest part of the jump, your body shape should be long and thin. Prior to landing, you need to move your feet ahead of the body. When landing, it is essential that you flex the ankles, knees and hips to absorb shock when you hit the sand. Your arms should also swing forward to rotate the body forward and over the feet. That completes this video. Hopefully the explanations and demonstrations have helped you better understand how to execute the 3 skills. Hopefully this video will act as a starting point for you to develop proficiency in the 3 athletics events: the 100-meter sprint, the discus, and the long jump. Oh!